Whether or not they're willing to admit it, basically every skateboarder has wanted to go pro at some point, or it's at least crossed their mind. For millions of skateboarders worldwide, it's their childhood dream to get sponsored one day. It's an understandable goal to have because, let's be honest, being a pro skater is a pretty sweet job. Professional skateboarders get to travel the world, go to all of the big events, and most importantly, they get to skate every single day. Unfortunately, chances are that you specifically are never going to go pro. At first, it might sound like I'm just being mean, but really, I'm just being honest. There's approximately 10 million skateboarders in the US alone, and there's only around 200 pros at any given time. This means that you have about a 1 in 50,000 chance of becoming a pro skater, which, if you think about it, those aren't terrible odds, but they're still not very good. Just going off of the stats alone, you're already at a pretty big disadvantage. With that said, there's a few things that you can do that will greatly increase your chances of getting sponsored and one day becoming a professional skateboarder. If you have any good tips of your own that you think could help other people out, be sure to leave them in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like on the video, and with that said, let's get right into it. Out of all of the reasons why people don't go pro, getting injured is by far the most unfortunate. Every skateboarder knows what it's like to slam and get hurt, so just about every skateboarder can empathize with this. Sadly, sometimes a single slam can end someone's career even before it starts. It's not super common, but it does happen. What makes this such an unfortunate reason for someone not to go pro is that it can really happen to anyone, and most of the time, it's pretty unexpected. If anything, it's even more likely to happen to people who are trying to go pro, since they're most likely skating more often and at a higher level than the average skateboarder. Getting injuries is something basically all athletes deal with, but it's especially common in skateboarding since it's so much harder on your body than most other professions. Career-ending slams are pretty rare, but they can happen, and if you aren't already sponsored, it's very possible that it can totally ruin your chances of being a professional skateboarder. Sometimes, it's not even one specific slam that ruins someone's career. For some people, it's actually a series of different slams over the span of a few years that really ends up hurting them. A few rolled ankles here and there can really start to add up over time, and sometimes it's death by 1,000 cuts rather than one specific fall. The thing is, it's something that's really hard to avoid just given the nature of skateboarding. Of course, there are things you can do to prevent getting hurt skating, and there's an entire video dedicated to it that'll be linked in the description, but falling is just part of skateboarding, and there's no way to avoid it entirely. The best thing you can really do to prevent injuries is to really take care of your body both before and after you skate, and to really practice and work your way up, because in skateboarding, it's pretty easy to get ahead of yourself. The harsh reality of why a lot of skaters never go pro is that they're just not good enough. Even if someone is a great skateboarder within their local scene, and they're way better than the average skater, that doesn't necessarily mean they're good enough to go pro. I mean, at any given moment, there's like 3 dozen 10-year-olds in California skating 16 stairs, so what's considered good can be pretty relative. Someone who's good at skating in some small town might not be very good compared to people who skate worldwide. That's just a reality that most of us have to face. There are cases where some people go pro, even though they might not fit the normal mold of what a lot of people consider good, but those are pretty rare. Now, just to be clear, skateboarding isn't about being the best, but realistically, you do have to be pretty good at skating to go pro. Honestly, you have to be pretty good at basically anything to go pro. I mean, imagine if you pulled up to your dentist and he was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty decent, but my homie is way better at pulling teeth. You should check out his Sponsor Me tape." You'd be kind of bummed, right? The reason why being good at skateboarding is so important for being a professional skateboarder is because if you're just average, it's a lot harder to stand out. So unless you're an extremely marketable person, most companies are going to shy away. Unfortunately, there's a lot of skatepark heroes out there who have a handful of decent tricks they do over and over, but that's not always enough to stand out. Everyone knows that one hometown hero who is really good compared to all of the other locals, but that doesn't always translate to being good compared to every other skater trying to go pro. The skateboarding industry really isn't that big, so like a lot of careers, if you want to be a professional skateboarder, chances are you have to be one of the top people doing it. One of the biggest factors that determines whether someone gets sponsored for skating is their connections. There's a famous saying that in life, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that couldn't be more true when it comes to professional skateboarding. It doesn't matter how many stairs you can kickflip first try, or how big of a handrail you front feebled, if you don't know the right people, your skateboarding career isn't going anywhere. The good news is, if you skate long enough, you get to know people, and if you're any decent, you're most likely going to get noticed. This isn't guaranteed though, so if you want to become a professional skateboarder, you need to do your best to get out there and meet people. Doing things like entering contests, filming video parts, or even just going to normal skateboarding events is a great way to meet people in the industry and get your name out there. The key thing here is to not overdo it, because if you do, you can end up hurting yourself in the long run. There's nothing wrong with emailing a team manager or introducing yourself to someone at an event, but you don't want to spam someone to the point where they block you. Instead, just take things slow and try to be as involved in the skate scene as you can. There's a time and a place for everything, and sometimes there's even a little finesse required, so you don't want to ruin your chances by overdoing it. If you keep putting out video parts, keep entering contests, and keep showing up to events, eventually people will start to notice.
So this is Derek, huh? Heard a lot about you, man. So, still waiting on your tape.
Just trying to get that last trick, you know?
He's still trying to get his final banger.
Unfortunately, one of the biggest reasons why people don't go pro is that they're just too hard to work with. There's been plenty of times over the years that new skaters came up who are absolutely killing it, but they just didn't know how to work with companies. Skateboarding is a pretty unprofessional profession, so you have to really be blowing it to make other people think that you're too hard to work with. Unfortunately, a lot of times, this is exactly what happens. A lot of skaters get caught up in the fast-paced lifestyle or just let their egos get in the way and end up ruining opportunities that millions of people would love to have. It's hard to say exactly what you should avoid doing because there's a lot of things that might rub someone the wrong way, but generally speaking, all you have to do is be a half-decent person to be around. Again, skateboarding is unlike most other professions in the sense that you don't really have to be professional at all, but there is a line somewhere that you're not supposed to cross, and you should know it when you see it. At the end of the day, even your favorite skateboarding brands are real companies, and even if skateboarding companies aren't as corporate as other industries, there's still a level of professionalism that you need to have if you want to get sponsored. If you keep doing things like missing footage deadlines or skipping film trips, or if you just rub people the wrong way in general, it's going to be a lot harder for you to turn pro, regardless of how good you are.
I got the copies! Ah!
If you want to become a professional skateboarder, timing is really important. I'm sure just about everyone can think of their favorite AM skater who had to wait 2 or 3 years to go pro, even though they were one of the best skateboarders in the world at the time. Now there's dozens of reasons why companies may wait to turn someone pro, but in a lot of these situations, it just comes down to the timing. For example, if a company is working on a video, they may want to wait until the release of the video before they turn someone pro. There's also situations where companies just don't have it in the budget to turn someone pro, and they need to either wait until they get more sales or wait for one of the older team members' contracts to end. The point is, there's a lot of situations where timing plays a key role in someone going pro. Aside from just the company's timing, it's also important to think about your own timing. If you're too old, or if you got sponsored by the company at a bad time, it can end up hurting your chances of going pro. A lot of these scenarios are out of any one person's control, but the main thing to take away from this is that timing can play a major factor in turning pro. Kids grow up thinking that you just have to be good and magically you turn pro one day, but there's a lot more that goes into it, and timing is definitely key. Statistically speaking, your chances of going pro are pretty small. As in really small. As in really, really small. I mean, you probably have a better chance of winning in Vegas than turning pro. Seriously, I looked it up and you are more likely to be struck by lightning than to become a professional skateboarder. Just let that sink in. Regardless, it's definitely not impossible, and if it's something you really want to do, then by all means, you should go for it. This video isn't meant to discourage anyone from chasing their dream of being a professional skateboarder, but rather to help them avoid doing things that could prevent them from achieving it. If you have any good tips of your own that might help people, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Be sure to leave a like on the video, and with that said, thanks for watching.